It should start.
Yeah. Okay, good. All right. Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Diane Chabard. I'm from Wyndham City Council. I'm the Coordinator of Learning Communities in Melbourne in Australia. So thanks for joining us and for being here, and I'm delighted to be your MC today. We are recording today's event and I'll be sending out the recording to those who've registered, and it will also be available on the Council website and the ALCN website. So to begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the lands from which we all come today and where learning takes place across Australia and globally. And I acknowledge the richness our Aboriginal community members bring to Wyndham and their learning that has been passed across generations for thousands of years. So as I mentioned, my name is Diane. I've worked as Coordinator of Learning Community at Wyndham Council since 2014, and I've overseen the development and implementation of Wyndham's learning community strategies. For the past 18 months, I've also been honoured to be the chair of the ALCN. So a little geographical context for you first. If you're joining us from elsewhere, Wyndham is located on the western edge of Melbourne in the state of Victoria and about halfway between Melbourne and Geelong. Wyndham covers an area of 542 square kilometres and it has a population of 288,212 in 2020. And the Australian Learning Communities Network, or ALCN, is a national network of leading edge practitioners across Australia, building sustainable communities using learning as the key element. Just a few quick logistics before we get started. Today's roundtable will run for about an hour and 30 minutes. As I said, we're interested to know who's in the audience, so please post a hello in the chat. You can write any questions you have for our speakers in the chat, and if you have a specific question for a specific presenter, please note who it's for. This is a webinar style event, so your mic has been muted and your camera is off, so we can avoid any background interruptions. And keep an eye on the chat as we go, because we'll be adding some links and information there. If you miss out on the chat or you can't see it because of the device you're on, we can send that out to you later. This event is part of the Wyndham Learning Festival, which is taking place fully online this year between the 23rd and the 30th of November. The Learning Festival is led by Wyndham Community and Education Centre in partnership with Wyndham Council. And I'd like to acknowledge Dr. Leonie Wheeler, who's the Honorary CEO of ALCN, who has coordinated this event with her great passion and knowledge of learning communities. The aim of our event today is to bring together ALCN members and friends from across Australia to share ideas about building resilient, entrepreneurial and sustainable communities. We hope that this will lead to further events in 2021. So the ALCN welcomes new members from around Australia. And you can see the link to the website in the chat. And Wyndham Council has partnered with the ALCN and PASCAL International Observatory to deliver this event as part of Wyndham's commitment as a member of the UNESCO Global Network of Learning Cities. So to begin with, I'd like to ask you to grab your device or open up a new tab in your browser. And Sharon, if you go to the next slide, we will see the link. So it's www.menti.com. And when you get to menti.com, it will ask you to enter that code that's on the screen, 5915169. And you press vote. And you'll be asked, what does being entrepreneurial mean for you? So you can see that the way Menti works is that the larger words are words that have come up several times. So innovative is something that's and innovative and innovation are very popular in our minds. Creative, collaborative, resilient. We've got forward thinking, risk taking, different lens, so using a different lens, being bold. So we can see that, you know, from that word cloud that's growing before our eyes, we can see that the ideas of being entrepreneurial and that entrepreneurial learning can take many forms. So, you know, whether we're thinking about working in our current roles or a business startup, or is it a state of mind? Is it about starting a new project? So we might move on to another question, which is, what is entrepreneurial learning? If you just go back into, you'll be prompted to go to the next slide. Just put your 3 words in. What is entrepreneurial learning meaning for us? Thinking outside the box, it looks like that's come up. Collaboration again. Fresh ideas. Team building. A certain state of mind. So this entrepreneurial learning is looking at it a little bit differently. It's not just about running a business or being creative in your own work. It's what can you do as an individual? What can you do to further your work as an entrepreneur? So challenging the status quo. Peer support, so there's a lot of collaboration thinking here, change, meeting challenges, lifelong learning. Okay, so to dive a little deeper into what being entrepreneurial means, I'd like to introduce Dr. Leonie Wheeler. Leonie is the Honorary Chair of the Australian Learning Community Network. She's also an Associate of the School of Global, Urban and Social Studies at RMIT University, and she's a board member of the PASCAL International Observatory. And she's recently returned from 5 years living and working in the Middle East. So over to you, Leonie.
Thank you very much, Diane. And as you can see from the ideas that have come up, they're very similar to the definitions that of the presentation before you. Is that presentation there?
The slide. Sorry, Leonie.
Yes. Entrepreneurial learning is about learning, developing skills and a mindset to be able to turn creative ideas into entrepreneurial action. It is a key competence for all learners, and it's about lifelong learning process in all forms of education, and which contribute to the entrepreneurial spirit or behaviour with or without a commercial objective. Now, this definition and the broad and narrow definitions actually came from a PASCAL webinar, which I think the link to that will be put up, PASCAL and UNESCO ULIL webinar, which the link will be put up on the side for you. But you can see that you've already covered all of these definitions in your presentation, and you will be hearing from the presenters who will explore this idea further. So I'm not going to take up too much time, but I do recommend that you go and look at that webinar on the challenge of developing the role for TVET business learning and entrepreneurships in learning cities. Now I would like to introduce the first speaker, Judith James. I've known Judith for a number of years, and we're so pleased that she's recently joined the board of PASCAL International Observatory and will be leading the Learning Cities Network entitled Reimagining Inclusive Economic Futures. Until recently, Judith worked at Swansea University in Wales, the UK, for 30 years, where she was responsible for strategic regional collaboration. She has extensive experience in developing student entrepreneurship and employability, student experience, equality and diversity, and widening participation. She continues to be a member of the Swansea Skills Partnership, which is responsible for the strategic development of Swansea Learning City. Judith has been a member of UNESCO International Expert Group on Developing Learning Cities and was influential in developing Swansea as a learning city. Swansea received a UNESCO Award for Learning Cities in 2015, and Judith has represented Swansea Learning City in all UNESCO International Learning Cities conferences. Judith will be speaking on why in a post-COVID world it is important to develop an entrepreneurial spirit within communities. Judith.
Leonie, thank you very much for that very warm welcome. And I must say I'm delighted to be invited to meet you all and speak with you about Swansea's journey as a learning city and why we chose to make entrepreneurial learning the centre of our learning city development. Next slide, please. Okay, so first of all, I look at the context in that Wales is unique because the Welsh government, which is devolved from the UK government, has a binding legal duty to pursue sustainable development in all it does, built into its constitution. Why is this important to a learning city? Well, countries sign up to the Sustainable Development Goals, but UNESCO sees that learning cities are the way to implement the Sustainable Development Goals at a local level. So therefore, learning cities and learning communities are really important about whether we're going to actually meet those goals. And in Wales, we have very important legislation called the Wellbeing of Future Generations Wales Act 2015. This gives us the ambition, permission and legal obligation to improve our social, cultural, environmental and economic well-being. And it makes a very good point of contact between communities and councils, between institutions, because we're all working to the same ambition. Next slide, please. The other important part about the Welsh Government policy context was that in 2010, they developed a youth entrepreneurship strategy with the ambition to develop and nurture self-sufficient entrepreneurial young people in all communities in Wales who will contribute positively to economic and social success. Not only that, they put some funding into it, which was extremely helpful because all the schools, the colleges and higher education had some funding to start to develop entrepreneurial learning. Next slide, please. So Swansea, not just the city, but the city region, has a long history of lifelong learning. I was presenting about this way in which we were collaborating across institutions and different organisations to develop lifelong learning that really reached out to communities, and we developed it with communities. And this presentation was recognised by UNESCO, and I was invited to join the panel that was developing the learning city concept. And therefore Swansea was invited to pilot the Learning City concept. And we started to think really carefully about how our collaborations could actually strengthen what we were doing across all learning. Next slide, please. So our motives to develop a learning city. Well, as in all entrepreneurial things, you are trying to meet your challenges. We all were agreed that we needed to meet the challenge of sustainability. Swansea had some particular challenges around poverty and social justice, the gap between rich and poor. We knew that we had to focus our learning opportunities on people living in disadvantaged communities in particular. And we also wanted to be resilient about external uncontrollable change. Now that was long before this pandemic. And the sort of things that we were thinking about was, what if a major employer in the region, which wasn't a Welsh company, suddenly decided to move to another country or another part of our country, and we lost thousands of jobs? That kind of change, we were trying to be resilient to that. So we decided that Swansea UNESCO Learning City and region needs to be innovative, entrepreneurial and inclusive. And we took those three words to be our working motto, really, our theme. Next slide, please. So why did we want to develop entrepreneurial skills for all? Well, I've put a slide up here with the different skills that entrepreneurial learning is thought to develop. And what was really interesting was that employers said, but they're the skills that we want. As well as entrepreneurship, people were being prepared by skills to be good entrepreneurs, to be able to work within an organisation and be creative and to help the organisation develop. So we felt that it was important for everybody from a lifelong learning perspective, from a work perspective, and also from the possibility that we would develop more entrepreneurs within the region. And collectively, we wanted to develop resilience, collaboration, and a community responsive strategic planning for our learning city. Next slide, please. Okay, this is a really important slide because it's about how we tried to permeate all parts of formal education with entrepreneurial learning by collaborating. So in the first slide, the first picture, the primary schools, that's actually a further education student who was going into primary schools to help them develop entrepreneurial learning. If you look at those children, they are developing a very simple enterprise about making smoothies, but their head teacher decided to use this enterprise learning in a way throughout the whole curriculum. So the children learned about where the fruit came from, how it was transported to the UK, how much they needed to use, how much the fruit cost, what they should therefore charge, what a profit margin was. They were learning all their English, their maths, their geography, their environmental studies, all through enterprise. These children are in a school, disadvantaged community in Swansea, and the head teacher had been very worried about lack of attendance, first of all, but then lack of involvement of the children in what they were learning. But enterprise learning was so relevant to their real lives, and they could understand why they were doing the maths, why they were doing the English, that it actually increased their attendance and made them much more participative in the learning experience. In secondary schools, the children work in teams, and these are often sponsored by local companies. And in their teams, they focus on a theme. So one year it might be innovation about sustainability. The next year, the theme might be inclusivity. So they're thinking about challenges in their theme. Then we come to higher education. At this stage, we expect students to use their research, what they're studying, to create their enterprise. And here you can see the first billionaire in Wales, who actually went to Swansea University, came back to the university to encourage the young entrepreneurs in what they were doing. And actually there was some real intellectual property being developed by these young people, and they were able to make real businesses from their studies. Next slide, please. We mustn't forget lifelong learning. We have community education centres that are developed throughout the region. Some within rural and isolated communities like this centre, some within very disadvantaged urban communities which have third generation unemployment and a persistent lack of engagement with education. But what they provide are classes that provide education, they provide training, and they also provide startup support, sorts of things like Wi-Fi, marketing support. Next slide, please. You also need to look at your whole ecosystem, because if you do develop more entrepreneurial people, you don't particularly want them to go away from your area to start their business up because there's a better premises somewhere else or more support somewhere else. So we thought very carefully about how we new enterprise in Swansea and the region. There were funded training programs, grants, support networks, all really important. There had to be a dedicated contact point so that people knew where to go to find all the information, and investment from the Development Bank of Wales. We also wanted to make sure there was incubation support. That was with space, peer support, broadband, marketing, social media. We have high performance computing in the institutions, the higher education institutions, and that was then made free for new enterprises. We developed clusters in suitable supportive venues. So we thought about the clusters that were important for the future of Swansea and developed an energy cluster, a life sciences cluster, a digital one. There's a Swansea Bay film studio, all different types of work spaces where people who are like-minded came together and supported each other. It was important there was networking and pop-ups in empty shops, and we developed meanwhile use contracts. So if there's an empty shop, it could be taken for a short space of time for somebody to test out their enterprise if it was public facing. Swansea won the UK Enterprise in Britain Award from primary to professional and has been voted the best city in the UK for female entrepreneurship. Next slide, please. And in 2015, Swansea was awarded the UNESCO Learning City Award, which was a really important recognition of the work that we've been doing. Next slide, please. From there, we went on to have our first learning festival. We only expected to have about 100 events and a few hundred people attending because it was a small ambition at first to just test the waters. It turned out that people were really enthusiastic. We had over 300 events and over 9,000 people attended those events. This was fantastic for everybody within the city, but it was important that it was very much focused on ensuring that people in disadvantaged communities and people who don't normally participate in community learning were attracted to attend. So there were things like a ukulele festival in the city centre, and people were turning up with their ukulele in their shopping bag and then quietly getting out and joining in. And it was really exciting to see people enjoying this festival. Next slide, please. So Swansea now, in the words of the leader, Rob Stewart, has made tremendous steps towards addressing barriers to participation, narrowing the gap between rich and poor, enhancing social cohesion, and developing a thriving knowledge economy. Now, Rob Stewart has made a video for UNESCO. It was for the International Day of Learning, but I think it's really important that you get a chance to see this video because he sums up what's happened in Swansea. Thank you.
I'm Rob Stewart, leader of Swansea Council. I know that Swansea is immensely proud to be part of the UN Global Network for Learning Cities. So I'd like to share with you a little bit about the work that we're doing here in Swansea and our passion for education and lifelong learning. would like to take the opportunity to use the International Day of Learning to congratulate all those who are doing so much hard work across the world. Swansea is immensely proud to be part of that network. Let's keep up the good work. I'm Rob.
Okay, next slide, please.
Just 1 minute left, thanks, Judith, sorry.
What you can see from that video, which is really important, is that there was commitment from the leadership of the city to support the development of the Learning City region. If you could go to the slide, it's number 13. Oh, sorry, before that. In the next slide, I was going to talk to you about the development in the PASCAL Learning Cities network of a group of cities and communities and organizations who are interested in rethinking how we respond following this pandemic. So entrepreneurship is going to be one really important part of this. So the network, that was the right slide. It's gone again though. Ah, can we go back to that?
Sorry, we're getting there. It's on hold. Yep.
The network is called Inclusive Economic Futures. And it's really interesting that the membership is not just in Europe. We've got members interested in joining from Bangladesh and also from cities in America. Okay, are we getting there now? We have some technical problems, I think, here. It's probably quickest if you just flick through these slides and then you'll come to it.
That's it.
That's it. Good. There we are. So it's PASCAL International Observatory, and they have Learning Cities networks, and there are different ones. This is one of them, and it's called Learning Cities, Reimagining Inclusive Economic Futures. If you go on to the next slide, please. The purpose is to create and support a network of cities, city regions and communities with a focus on developing a secure economy whilst working towards achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Next slide, please. There are 4 themes. One of them is creating an entrepreneurship ecosystem. So many of the cities that are involved were previously involved in an entrepreneurial learning city network, and they're very keen to take what they've learned from this forward into developing an ecosystem. Visioning a new future of work for well-being. This important part of this is for well-being. How will work change? Because of many people have started to work from home. Some people are enjoying this, some people are not. How are we going to change work to meet people's needs for the future? Some people won't be returning to work. A lot of people, certainly in the UK, unfortunately have lost their jobs. We need to think about maybe a new future of not working for well-being. And this is where lifelong learning really comes into its own. How are people going to be involved and part of their community and part of society if they're not part of the working world? And this, of course, involves people who have retired as well. And then the 4th is adjusting to an uncontrolled external environment. And this is a reference not only to the pandemic, but to whatever economic fallout that we have following on from that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Judith. That was fantastic. And I'm sorry about cutting you short. I think we could all listen to you for hours. That was a wonderful presentation and some really some really important connections between learning cities and communities and entrepreneurial spirit and the SDGs. So thank you for that. I now have to quickly move on to our second speaker. I'd like to introduce Martin Probst. Through his company, Profound Leadership, Martin helps managers and team leaders to empower themselves with skills of the future so they can lead with and positively impact the people around them through their actions and authentic leadership style. Some of Martin's many achievements include working in different industries on 6 continents. He's a certified learning facilitator. He's designed and delivered over 180 workshops. He's done a whole heap of things, which I might have to put into the chat to really do him justice. So Martin will be speaking about the broader idea of entrepreneurial skills and how learning communities and cities can foster a culture of entrepreneurial thinking in their community. Over to you, Martin.
Thank you, Diane, and good afternoon, everybody. It's so great to be around. I hope you can see my screen. If you can just quickly type in a yes, that would be awesome in the chat box. So I know what's going on from your end. That is fantastic, and everybody can hear me as well. It is so great to connect online, and I actually, as a Wyndham resident, very much appreciate the opportunity to share some insights with you on today's topic, developing entrepreneurial leadership skills necessary for a changing environment. And let's get started with a bit of a brain activity. And if you do have a microphone, maybe just grab the microphone and come off mute if you have an answer to the following questions. Or question, how can we connect all 9 dots with 4 pencil strokes without lifting it? Who can help me out with that activity? You may also want to use the chat box if you don't have a microphone. What could be a potential answer where we can connect all 9 dots with 4 pencil strokes without lifting it? Let's see if we can come up with a solution here. I'm just checking the chat box. If somebody's typing away at the moment, it's pretty quiet. So I think we're stimulating the brain a bit and hoping to come up with some solutions. And if not, I'm happy to help out a bit. Sometimes those challenges can be quite tricky. I'll help you out with the first line. Let's go across diagonally, and then let's move towards the right. Oh, that was a bit generous. I think we're going over the edge here, over the dot, moving across down and moving up again. Now, there's always a reason why I'm doing an activity. I think this exercise clearly demonstrates that we do need to get outside the square to connect all the dots. And I think it is exactly the same thing with entrepreneurship. Now, there's no doubt that it has been a very challenging year with the impact of COVID-19, the lockdowns, and many other challenges, particularly here in Victoria. Therefore, I believe it's even more important to think outside the square and step outside of our comfort zone. Outside the box, Diane, absolutely, that's what it is. So I think it is really important to start trying new things. Let's experiment and assist in creating an exciting new norm. Who knows how it's going to look like, but really creating a new norm by dealing with change. And change is one of those words which makes a lot of people nervous and uncomfortable. I know, as a fact, I just delivered a workshop recently and I said, who loves change? And a lot of hands went up. And I followed up with a question. I said, who loves to change? And quite a lot of hands slowly came down again. So the question is, I don't think, can we afford to stay in our comfort zone in today's busy and ever-changing environment and landscape? I personally actually don't think so. And I think because if the rate, and I just go to the next slide here, if the rate of change on the outside exceeds the rate of change on the inside, the end is near. And we all know what's happened even to huge global brands. Be creative and innovative. So welcome to the future where we must be creative and innovative, because I believe disruption is the new norm. And I know, being an entrepreneur in 2020 and soon 2021, I can't believe I'm actually saying that, it's not really easy. But I'm glad to be in such a great and strong community here. It is absolutely amazing, and thank you for sharing some information. I'm certainly looking forward to some of the other guest speakers as well, what they think about entrepreneurship. So this is really great to be here, as I said, and I think that curiosity is really important to understand or ask what's next. Curiosity is so an important part, and I believe a foundation for creating innovation. So let's just be clear, and we already had a word cloud with Menti. I love that software. We played around the other day. It's fantastic, gives us an insight. But just to be clear and create a foundation, what exactly are creativity and innovation? So let's define those two terms, because it's really important that we understand the difference between those two words. So let's get started with creativity. What is creativity? To me, what I came up with simple definition is unleashing the potential of the mind to create new ideas by making connections others cannot see. So it is that curiosity that I talked about before. So where does that leave innovation? What is innovation? To me, innovation is taking then the new ideas, so the creativity that we have, taking the new ideas and turning them into reality to provide a competitive edge that is so important, because I prefer to disrupt than being disrupted. Now, the test for innovation is to make sure that the new idea that we want to turn into reality are actually achievable. I came up with 3 key areas. The first one is achievable. To be clear, innovation is not just having a crazy idea and jumping into something, a new venture, without any prior homework. It does require research. It does require understanding of customer needs. It does maybe require recognizing your supply chain has to change completely, rethinking your business model, digitally enabling your workforce, and so much more. It's also important that we can, which brings us to the second part, measure our innovation. Otherwise, how can we know that we are successful and that our implementation is actually working? So this step requires control measures, procedures, financial planning to ensure cash flow. I think that's a big problem these days. Cash flow is in order. And again, there's so many more things that we could list, and I probably could do a whole workshop on that topic. And finally, another point that really is important when it comes to innovation is that we can actually repeat what we have. It needs to be repeatable. This is another important point, as I said, because leverage becomes such an important word in innovation, entrepreneurship, or even in business. Unfortunately, I met actually quite a few entrepreneurs over the years that were just lucky at some stage, being at the right time, at the right place. Yes, I do believe it happens. However, the challenge is, how do you want to repeat and leverage from your success if you don't know exactly what makes you successful? So that raises another important question of what is entrepreneurship? And I say that all with all respect, knowing the high caliber of people who are on that online session. But what entrepreneurship, I'm having so many conversations and I get so many different definitions. Again, what I believe entrepreneurship is actually the combination of the 2 that we discussed. Entrepreneurship to me is creativity plus innovation. And I personally believe there are opportunities everywhere. But the two fundamental questions, and you might even want to write them down when it comes to entrepreneurships, are based on my experience. Can you see them? So that creativity part that comes into play. And follow-up question, can we, let me just see if it comes up, there it is, can we turn them into reality? Now, I believe the first thing that needs to happen is we need to remove some roadblocks and idea killers that I refer to here. And you may know what I'm referring to if I just show you the next slide here. They are just some examples, and usually I get a bit of a giggle if I come up with that slide. Probably it does sound familiar talking to other people, or especially to some people who feel very comfortable still, who want to hold on to the good old times and are not really willing to enter into that change mode. So here are just a few bits and pieces that I gathered talking to people which actually had quite a bit of resistance. So some of these points, as I said, sound perhaps familiar to you. Then once we remove the roadblocks, I do believe we need to stop being so busy all the time. Almost every day or a single day, I would say, I call somebody up, and usually the answer is when I ask, what are you up to? They say, oh, I'm busy, keep it short. And I say, busy doing what exactly? And often when we have a bit of a conversation, it turns out that people are just being busy for the sake of being busy, you know, doing their old thing that is not working anymore because they are stressed and often have what I call a fixed mindset of, to achieve more, I have to work longer and I have to work harder, which is absolutely unsustainable. It's just not sustainable at all. And Judith indicated that beautifully with the resistance or resilience, I should say. Yes, it's important, but at the same time, we also need to ensure that we look after ourselves and our being, because that needs to be sustainable as well from an energy point. We need to remove our blinkers, in other words. We need to stand back, zoom out, and look at the big picture, which I quite often say, what is this really all about, before we jump into the details. And please give yourself a bit of a break and actually start your creative thinking. Bring back your curiosity. Jesus, there's a bit of a tongue breaker there. Bring back your curiosity and childlike wonder. Celebrate the wonder of creativity, in other words, because I believe we have a very powerful imagination, especially as a child. Sometimes we lost it. If it lost, please bring it back. Have some fun. If it's a business, if it's in your community, if it's in your sport club, whatever it is, let's have fun. Let's have less meetings and more fun, and actually create new recipes for success. And I'm actually almost there. Absolutely. And thanks for giving me the heads up there. I really actually want to leave you with, and I'll just go to the next slide here, go to a roadmap to recovery that I just came across the other day from Deloitte. I really encourage you to download that roadmap to recovery and beyond. I had a look through. I will, throughout today's online session, I will post the link, so you do have access. It's a bit easier than typing it in from the PowerPoint slide, but I'm sure that gives you something to go away from today's session and really start looking at implementing some innovation with curiosity and becoming even more an entrepreneur. And Diane, as you said, I think my time is up. That leaves me just to say thank you very much for having me. It was an absolute pleasure to present, and I just look at the chat box and probably we have some answering questions down the track. So I'm just handing back to Diane, and as I said, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much, Martin. Amazing insight into the entrepreneurship skills and learning, particularly in Wyndham. Now now it's time to move on to our next speaker. So Max Eastcott, who is the General Manager of Guarda Shire Council, which is located in northeast New South Wales, was scheduled to present live, but has sent his apologies today due to an illness in the family. So he has sent a recorded presentation, and I'll just put some information about Max in the chat. Jack, that's Daryl's, not Max's. Sorry, we've got a lot of...
Do you want to just go with mine first, Diane?
Okay, if you're happy to, Daryl.
It keeps popping up and driving everybody crazy.
Well, I think it just wants to be seen. Jack, are you happy to... We'll go to...
Sure, that's fine.
Okay. Well, let me introduce Daryl Wilson. He's the Manager of Economic Development. He was the Manager of Economic Development and Tourism. And in that role, Daryl authored and implemented the Path to Economic Development strategies, which saw a period of significant economic growth in Wyndham. And more recently, Daryl has transitioned to a specialist business and investment advisory role, which includes initiating the development of a small business innovation hub. Daryl has worked with aspiring entrepreneurs, small enterprises, multinational companies, and everything in between in pursuit of growing the local Wyndham economy and creating employment opportunities for the resident workforce. And in 2018, Daryl's work was recognised nationally when awarded the Economic Development Australia's inaugural Peter Chafee Economic Development Leadership Award. Well done, Daryl. Over to you. Thank you. And I'll ring the bell when you've got a minute.
We might let the presentation go and then I'll come back after that. So it's just to listen and read, hopefully.
Sure.
Fingers crossed. Have you got that, Jack?
Sharon's going to show it.
Oh, okay. Now it doesn't want to play.
Yep, it's turning, so let me know if the sound's on.
Okay, I can't hear the sound, but we can just proceed, I think. It's the
can.
music background. Okay, so some of us might be able to hear the music. Those that can't, it's okay, you just read on the screen.
It's not progressing, Jack. Can you just
Now, apologies if we had technical problems there. I think back to you, Daryl. Not sure. We can perhaps send out that Daryl's presentation if some of you didn't get to see all of it.
We'll just keep going. Don't know what happened there. Who's that?
So, Daryl, would you like to just continue the talking part? And I think I could see the slides. I'm not sure if other people were able to see the slides. I've had messages that people were able to see but weren't able to. Some were able to hear the music and some weren't. But I think we've seen the slides.
I don't know what's going on, Diane. Got no idea.
Okay, so we've just shown your slides.
I'm not in control of the slides.
No, so Sharon. So Sharon was showing your slides. Are you wanting to? Teams seems to be playing up for us today. Are you wanting to show it again or to? Okay, so Judith is saying she used the arrows and it was a great presentation, especially about developing the ecosystem of support. Yeah. Okay, so I think the slides are finished now. So back to you, Daryl. What did you see on screen? Well, it worked for us. I think it perhaps didn't work for you.
I don't know who it worked for. I'm assuming people saw it and had time to read it. Is that a fair assumption? No?
Yes. Yeah, I can see some. I can see some messages in the chat.
All right.
Yep.
Well, we'll just proceed anyway, and we'll pretend you've read it. So, look, very briefly, I guess in terms of that presentation, which was going to defray me from saying too much now, 2021 will be the 4th year of Winnovation, a festival of events that are aimed to inspire and activate a city business culture of innovation and entrepreneurship. Winnovation program continues to evolve and develop in response to local economic conditions, with a focus on and delivering on the city's aspirations for a sustainable, vibrant economy characterised by a diverse mix of industry sectors. This will ensure that Wyndham is well placed to be a major contributor to the rapidly changing knowledge economy. And a diverse economy has greater capacity to respond effectively and remain relatively strong during periods of economic uncertainty. It's therefore critical that economic development programs initiated by organisations such as local government are not simply bought off the shelf as a one-size-fits-all approach. Programs must respond to the challenges and opportunities of the day within the specific region, but with a clear focus on where you are heading, how you're going to get there, and within the context of emerging national and international trends. Council has invested significantly in tools to provide important economic data to inform economic development programming. This ensures that programs are tailored to meet the challenges and opportunities that prevail within the local economy. And this is very much the case with our Winnovation agenda. So just a couple of examples of useless data, but might be of interest to people just to prove that we can get our hands on this information. In the last month, Wyndham residents spent $130.9 million with local businesses, a decrease of 29.6% for the same time last year. Wyndham residents spent $186 million on online purchases, 27.41% increase from the same time last year. I can even tell you what residents spent their money on and where they spent it. Information of this nature, just like the information, if you happen to capture it in my presentation, relating to the skills base of the resident workforce, provides important data-based evidence to implement well-informed strategy, policy and program development. So what does that look like in practice? Firstly, let me draw on what can be best described as a lesson learned scenario. The names and places have been withheld to protect the innocent on this one. So this was on a circumstance that took place in a regional centre of Australia some 2 years ago. The particular region in question is known for a specific high-tech industry, which in essence is driven by federal government agencies. The plan was to establish a high-tech startup business incubator as complementary to the town's major industry. But despite receiving government funding, the initiative never saw the light of day. And the reason? A very limited pool of skilled people in the region to participate in the startup incubator in the first place. There are a number of key elements, I believe, that make up a strong competitive economy, including government policy, infrastructure, technology, access to education, environmental policy, business support and human resource. And it's my contention that human resource is the single most important factor. In fact, when a business seeks to relocate or establish in a new area, more often than not, the first question they seek an answer to is, where do I find my workers? And what we know about Wyndham is that we have a strong pool of knowledge workers who, given the opportunity, have the foundations for starting and growing knowledge enterprises. It sounds simple, but not all regions can boast human resources and knowledge economy. Winnovation aims to build on the city's level of human resource skills and knowledge foundations, as indicated through the analysis of our local economic data. Now, whilst Wyndham has more new business entries than any other local government area in the country, what we also know is that the average annual dollar turnover per business is one of the lowest in the country. In other words, we have a large number of people who start an enterprise, but a high number of individuals who can't take the business to a level beyond early startup stage. And it was this which was the catalyst for our very successful Innovate to Accelerate program. This intensive program, an element of our innovation agenda, focuses on building individual entrepreneurship capacity as well as building sustainable business growth. I'm nearly done. Yep, it represents a significant financial resourcing investment by council that is rarely matched by other local government organisations, but its value in taking participants and their respective early stage enterprises to far higher levels of both business acumen and business turnover. The resulting translation to growth and employment generation has been more than significant. And to further demonstrate our approach in responding to economic conditions of the day, the program content was revised this year, extended to include more established business and rebadged as Innovate to Regenerate. In other words, a direct response to the challenges of COVID-19 and a direct response to what the data was telling us. So in conclusion, I trust my presentation, whilst a little bit disconnected, has reinforced the need to develop programs which are informed by local knowledge, local economic data and the aspirations of the local community. Thanks, Diane.
Thank you, Daryl, and sorry about the time constraints and the technical issues, but thank you very much for sharing some of the really inspiring local Wyndham examples, and thank you for the part you've played in growing Wyndham over the years. So I think because of our technical problems and our time constraints for today, I think we will have to share Max Eastcott's video with you when we send out the presentations from today. So my apologies there. But I would like to now move on to our roundtable, where we have 4 key ALCN members who will give us a taster of opportunities and challenges in learning communities around Australia. As we've got a packed agenda, I will keep we can only allocate them 5 minutes each. I'll give you a signal when it's 1 minute to go. And to do justice to the speakers' introductions, we're going to put bio information and links to some of the programs into the chat. So I'd first like to take us to Melton. That's we're joined by Cassandra Connolly, who's the Lifelong Learning Project Officer, and Christine Sitter, who's from the Economic Development and Tourism team, both from Melbourne City Council, and they'll share with us about Hothouse and other entrepreneurial programs. Over to you.
Hi everyone, and thanks for inviting me to this lovely roundtable. It's been very informative so far. I'm Christine Cedar, Acting Coordinator in the Economic Development team at Melbourne City Council in Melbourne, Australia, for those who are outside Australia. I'm here to talk about our program that we commenced in 2019 for new business startups. Our fast and growing community was presenting us with inquiries based around residents seeking a career change through the establishment of their own business. We also had many local residents and even new Australians that were skilled up with great business ideas, but with little knowledge or language barriers on how to launch their own business in Australia. Then Launch Vic, a state government initiative, came along and presented us with a grant funding opportunity to draw our local startup entrepreneurs, and we formed what we now call the Hothouse Project. We are now in our third season of running this project. Next slide, please. The Hothouse Project is designed to give our participants and the skills and confidence to turn their idea into a reality. The mentoring team behind the Hothouse Project are entrepreneurial specialists, and they operate in Victoria or through Victoria University. Their combined experience extends into industry failures, business disruption, and growing digital communities globally. So they're quite broad-based. Their technique in running the masterclasses is very unique and hands-on. By the time the program is completed, we have seen the most introvert of participants with skills and confidence to launch into the next phase of their business development. Next slide, please. The delivery of the Hothouse Project is in a style that is relatable to all, regardless of education level, age and backgrounds. It's for anyone who has an entrepreneurial mindset. You don't have to be in business before all we want is that people that have identified a gap in the market. It's for anyone that's also on a career change journey, that has an idea of something that can be commercialised. And even small business owners that have an idea that could transform an existing product or service in their existing business. Next slide. This program is not about selling the dream to our participants and letting them know that they will be successful, but rather we just want them to test their idea and see whether they've got a viable product. So up on the screen now, you'll see the course topics that we run through. We have participants that completed the program and actually dropped their business idea completely, and we consider that a success, and the participants have considered that a success as well, because it's saved them a lot of heartache and time, and most importantly money, in pursuing that business idea. The start stream outlines the course content, but we're also in our next stages of growing this program, and it's called the Grow Club. And that is, the Grow Club will be presented next year, and it's in relation to the participants who have already completed the Start Club, who are now ready to scale up their businesses and start employing and start looking at how to expand their product range. Next slide, please. So to just give you an overview of really what this, just one back, to give you an overview of what this program is all about, I'd like to basically present this video. It's pretty much sums up, what our participants go through. Thank you. Probably technical issues like the rest of us.
The video. Oh, here we go.
Here it goes. Here it goes, yeah.
No, it's not.
No, that's all right.
No.
I'm happy to put the link in the chat, and everyone can view it in their own time, given that we're a little bit short on time. So if you go down to the next slide.
One minute to go, ladies.
Yep.
Yeah. Now we're having real technical difficulties. The whole thing's just frozen on me. Sorry, Christine.
That's all right. I'm happy to put the video link in the chat and people can view it later on. That's not a problem at all. I'll just finish off by saying that the Hothouse project is now in its third highly successful season. We've seen 84 participants complete the project so far. Many are well on their way to running their own business idea. The Hothouse community is now well connected and continues to support and grow business collaborations with one another. Hothouse participants are also well connected with council teams. They get updates and ongoing opportunities continue for them. Also, our Hothouse participants, most importantly, have been integrated into our business networking program, which is called the Venture Mountain Business Network. So it's a program that we've basically commenced with startups, but we continue to really work closely with them. And obviously, our goal is to see them grow, develop businesses, employ, and basically establish a viable business in the City of Mountain. We also accept neighbouring businesses as well. So it's about being all inclusive and helping the West basically grow as well. And I'll just, if you've got any questions, please pop them in the chat section. I'll endeavour to answer them as best as I can. And I'll pass you over to Cassandra Conley to talk to you a little bit about Mountain City Council's learning strategy. Thank you.
I'm going to be super quick, 20 seconds. Hi everyone, I'm Cassandra. I'm the Lifelong Learning Projects Officer from Mountain City Council. We've got a 10-year learning strategy that's just been undertaken. One of our key focus areas is learning for earning. The strategy has a focus on entrepreneurship and business growth, and its action plans outline how we're going to deliver those initiatives and support partners to meet its goals. If you want to contact either of us, here's our details. Thank you for having us today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cass and Christine. And sorry to race through. I think, again, we could have listened to you both for an hour. So I have to move further around the round table. I'd like to introduce Shan Boller, who's currently the Acting Team Manager of Townsville City Libraries, and otherwise the Coordinator of Operations and Research, and Sean Crane, who's a Research Librarian also at Townsville City Libraries in Queensland. And they'll talk about their Entrepreneurs in Residence program. And I'll give you a little ring when there's 1 minute.
Sure. Thanks, Diane. Okay, so we're here to talk about the Entrepreneur in Residence program run by Townsville City Libraries and Townsville City Council here in North Queensland. This program featured multiple business identities sharing their expertise on a range of topics crucial to any aspiring entrepreneur or startup. Next slide, please. The EIR program came about courtesy of the Queensland Government and the State Library of Queensland. Council and City Libraries were granted $30,000 to realise our potential, the theme for the State Library of Queensland. We strived for deeply local outcomes and for the library service to extend our reach deep into the community. Our goals were to increase awareness of the library's role as a business resource. Obviously, we have books on business which are being added to all the time, and we've put a renewed focus on our online resources as well. But it's also about the space too. I mean, these printers, scanners, etc. They're all vital equipment for conducting business. We also wish to increase the delivery of programs supporting entrepreneurship in Townsville, as it's so important to the local economy to have skilled and knowledgeable citizens capable of adapting to the changing nature of business. We wish to raise awareness in the community of the value of entrepreneurship to the local economy. The library is delighted to play our part in the rejuvenation of Townsville's economy after we suffered a fairly catastrophic flood last year, and obviously with the pandemic this year as well. We want local workers engaged in the development of new and existing business, and the working population of Townsville has the skills to meet demand for future growth industries. We wish to train library staff to assist with business inquiries as well. We want all staff to feel confident in handling those requests that might come from the business community. And finally, we wish to provide mentoring to local upcoming entrepreneurs via bookable one-on-one sessions with our chosen professionals. Next slide, please. So for this program, we put a tender out which attracted interest from as far away as Sydney, but it was a local business, Green Apple Marketing, that were chosen to be our EIRs. Green Apple are a duo of local businesswomen, otherwise known as Felitza and Mitra, who specialise in marketing, entrepreneurial and business advice. They were selected in part due to their strong and established networks within the local community. We also worked with the Smart Precinct NQ team. SPNQ is a new initiative for Townsville designed to foster and produce innovation and entrepreneurship within the North Queensland region. We held some of our one-on-one mentor sessions in their newly refurbished premises. Next slide, please. So City Library staff, Green Apple and guests came together to hold 16 workshops with 7 local and interstate presenters across 3 library branches and online. We had over 100 unique attendees in our workshops and mentoring sessions, learning about marketing, social media, grant writing, health and wellness, goal setting, business development and relationships. We had fantastic promotion of the EIR events and City Libraries itself via Council's marketing team and Green Apple. There's been quite a bit of interest in our EIR program from other libraries around the state and further afield. We seem to have been pioneers in running a program like this in a library, so it's great to be breaking new ground the way that we have. Next slide, please. We'd like to touch on some of the participants in EIR, as there was a core group of about 8 people who attended most, if not all, of the events. Paul was a at Laverack Barracks, who's probably worked one too many graveyard shifts. He was bored and wanted change. We never did find out if he was sitting on $1 million idea, but at the very least, he was really keen to see what's involved in being an entrepreneur. Alicia is an existing businesswoman who works in tourism and was looking for the skills to grow her business. Incidentally, another attendee who was also involved in tourism around Carnarvon Gorge, which was on Alicia's radar as a destination to promote. These two ended up exchanging details to work together in their same interests, which was fantastic to see. And Kathy had longed to be her own boss and to work in a field that was dear to her heart. She'd been made redundant this year due to COVID, so this was her now or never moment. I'd encourage you to watch the video at that URL when you get a chance after today, if you want to get a bit more insight into the program. So what's next for our libraries and local businesses and entrepreneurs? We will continue to run more workshops and programs suited to entrepreneurs and collaborate with SPNQ on how we can collectively support each other and the innovation community. The library's new digital makerspace will see increased promotion and use. Plans are underway to develop a council webpage targeting business and entrepreneurs, and we're pleased to have had a hand in that. We will continue to promote library resources, spaces and services, and a recent development there is the inclusion of library information in the Support Local Townsville e-newsletters that are being sent to local businesses. We are repurposing our City Library's Instagram account to a more business focused, and we wish to follow and share the journey of the attendees of the 2020 EIR program and build their capacity as the next EIR mentors. We'll continue to collaborate with entrepreneurs and business owners to shape the library's collection of resources. We've all learned a tremendous amount running this EIR, made all the more challenging with COVID, but it's certainly something we'll look to do again, given the feedback that we've received. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. And a great, a really innovative program set in a library, and there's been some really interesting comments in the chat, which you might like to have a look at. We'll have to go on to our next roundtable panelist, but yeah, you may like to respond to some of those. It's a really innovative way of making that sort of support accessible to the community. So thank you very much. I'd like to move on to Vicky Simmons. Vicky is the General Manager of Policy and Projects at Sudbury Community House in Western Australia. So we're moving across to the West Coast. Sadly, she's leaving this role soon, and she'll present on the Sudbury Community Education Hub. And I'll give you a ring on the bell when you've got a minute left. Over to you, Vicky.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm delighted to be amongst you all today. And I need to say that the weather is glorious in Perth at the moment. So Sudbury Community House is a small not-for-profit organisation. We consist of 2 houses. One is the community centre and the other is an early learning centre. Its bottom line is under stress. COVID-19 provided the space to reevaluate operations and foster a mind shift with the staff to move forward. That included the free community programs and services needed to change. Organisation of the Sudbury Community House Technology Room, which is the one that you're looking at the moment, also has the same amount of computers on the other wall, not evident. So the formula that came out of this in-house was that we needed to utilise this room because the people who hired it previously were not going to do so post-COVID. So we had this wonderful setup of technology, and so we needed to find a new formula for this room. As part of that formula, at the same time, we were awarded a small funding grant with a National Be Connected program for technology literacy for over 50s. So each participant would receive a 2-hour free sessions provided. So with these two things in mind, and a lot of enthusiasm, the launch of Sudbury Community Education Hub took part in July. So what is now seen as an enterprising community model, after the completion of 2-hour free sessions by our community members, generally they would have the opportunity to complete their modules online. However, the community itself has determined that they wish to continue at Sudbury Community Education Hub with other learners. So that sense of community was very important to their learning. Therefore, we were able to introduce into this formula the preparedness to pay a small fee to utilise the library, to utilise the technology room. So 1 day per week for 2-hour sessions by community over a 5-week period has generated $345. Now, this whole concept of generating income is quite a new thing for this organisation. So the actual value of this income then enables the organisation the capacity to offer the coordinator who gets paid for the 2 hours, the facilitator of this program, who gets paid for the 2 hours of introducing the program. Now we are able to offer her more hours because of the way that the community are now charged a small fee. So this has been an interesting insight in terms of the mind shift of staff who've worked in an organisation who have basically for many, many years been providing free services and programs or bringing in an income through the utilisation of their rooms. So what we're seeing, and I think what is timely with our connection to this network, is the importance of having the opportunity to understand how other people are working in this space, but also to become comfortable with the notion that the money that's generated from community then gets reinvested back into community opportunities. So thank you for that and the opportunity today.
Thank you, Vicky.
Diane, I don't have a chat icon on my screen, so if people go in, I may not get to be able to, to answer those questions.
Okay, so there's none. There is a comment from Leonie. That's good that the learners want to continue, who have shown to be very flexible. There's no questions directed to you at the moment, but thank you. Okay, we'll continue our journey around Australia, and now we'll go back to Victoria. I'd like to introduce Julie McKay. She's the founder and managing director of Enable Australia in the Hume City, and she's here to talk about Enable Social Enterprises. So over to you, Julie.
Thanks, Diane. Also thanks to Leonie, and also referral from the Hume Learning community, the chair there, Ken Thompson. A big shout out to him as well. He does some amazing work in Hume. So I wanted to just talk about Enable itself. So a little bit of background to provide some context on how we sort of fit into that lifelong learning and work and learning world. So Enable are a social enterprise. We've been operating since 2014. We're actually a not-for-profit social enterprise, which means that we're trading commercially to generate all of our revenue, which Vicky, maybe you and I need to have a chat offline on that subject as well, on how to generate revenue in that space. But we don't actually receive any government service provider funding. We are motivated by, if you want to move on to the next slide, please, as well. We're motivated by work and learning focus, and also obviously the environment. Our major source of income is from our recycling and reuse strategies, and 100% of our profits go back into our organisation so that we can run our programs, which substitutes for the lack of government funding. So our impact, we've worked with over 850 participants. We've had a stack of employment pathway outcomes. We've diverted almost now up to 200 tonnes of tech. And really our ethos sits around the collaborate and not duplicate model. Our program partners are now in their 50s, so to speak, as in number, and which is a really important part when you look at that, the whole ecosystem of work and learning and supporting people with disability into, viable work. Funding partners are also part of our business model, as in grants, etc. So we're also at the growing stage pre-COVID of our business life cycle. So when we were challenged with the worsening issue or the wicked problem of the digital divide and the social exclusion caused by COVID, what we found is we're getting phone calls literally immediately. So phones were ringing, unemployed persons, low income, people over 65, particularly when the libraries closed in Victoria. They had no outlets to go and, get online and do, be included in family life or work or other interests. And what we found too is that problem's not going away, and that was affirmed by a recent study, which I've included the link there in the slide. So I just want to move on to the next slide, please. So I want to talk about what we did in response to the digital divide and community calling us asking for help. So just pop on to the next slide there, please, or not. All right, I'll keep talking. So one of our major visions is around a connected community without disadvantage. And obviously the COVID situation, that took on a whole new meaning for us around responding to a community need around digital inclusion. Probably aligned with that community responsiveness that Judith was talking about in that early session. So basically we have distributed nearly 300 items across the state of Victoria so far, and we've done that manually, old 80s style. People ring up, have you got any tech? Yes, we have. How much is it? Can get it out to community. So that's how we've responded, with a very rudimentary sort of type of business model. Moving into a midterm, we're looking to formalise a hub and spoke distribution model where we're working with our community partners, large charities, small charities, training organisations, neighbourhood houses, etc., on getting that technology into the hands of people in need. And we're going to be doing that through an online platform, which is literally in development as we speak, where people will be able to look online and say, yep, I can have that one's suitable for my learning needs or likes thereof, and off we go, all online. So most importantly here, I think that there's been 2 new roles that have been created through our partnership with a large charity. So the Lord Mayor's Charitable Foundation, with support from the Paul Ramsey Foundation, had a look at what we were doing and said, hey, look, this is terrific. We'd like to support you and be your funding partner in this. And that's now enabling us to get more technical and, as I said, formalise that process, formalise an online platform to make us accessible, not just in Victoria, but across a broader range. And whilst we're doing all of that, the new roles then support work and learning opportunities for predominantly young people with disability in sales and marketing, and also a high level of tech, which is repair and refurbish. And both of those industries are growing, which will help those that are interested in those industries actually transition into jobs of hopefully their choice. That's me done. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julie, and what an impressive way you've been able to support your local community during such a difficult time. So well done.
Thank you.
Okay, so now it's time to hand back to Dr. Leonie Wheeler. We were going to do another Menti exercise with 2 questions. I'm wondering, Leonie, whether you thought we could perhaps cut back to 1 question, but that's up to you. We'll see if we can get through.
Well, this question here is actually the question about what you want to learn next year is going to be asked in the evaluation. So if everyone could run, everyone could fill out the evaluation form when Sharon sends it out, then we can actually cover that one about what you're wanting to learn. But I just so this one idea that you learned today, if you could put that in the Menti, just about one idea you've learned today, and while you're doing it, I'll just like to thank all the presenters, and I know we didn't do justice to them because we just knew we were going to run out of time, and we did. And I just thank Judith starting us off describing Swansea Entrepreneurial Learning City and developing and nurturing entrepreneurial young people. And I know that young people was a theme throughout. If we had to listen to Max's rural example, that would have been a theme there. But we saw the councils, we saw Melton, Townsville, Wider Learning Region and Wyndham all doing wonderful things, and the council was an enabler. And I think Daryl talked about evidence base and the need to get that evidence base and actually have responses to that. And the Melton Hothouse project and the Townsville Library Entrepreneurship and Residence Program, all very wonderful, pioneering work for library as well. And Melton, the 10-year strategy, Learning for Earning strategy. So, and in Sudbury House, you know, the issue of not having income and then working on different strategies to get the income, and then to finish off with Julie on Enable Australia and the amazing impacts that that we heard about. Today was a taster for me, and I think the session's been recorded, and with the permission from the presenters, we'll make these presentations available. And we'll also, I'm going to nag some people for some stories out of this, post to our newsletters, post to PASCAL International Observatory, and hopefully, if people are interested in wanting to take it further, we might be able to look at academic journals as well. But I just am incredibly thankful for those who've presented today, and to thank you for what you're learning. So if you want to stay on and tell me what you want to do for next year as well and what we could do, you're most welcome. But so if we look at what people are learning, the cross-generational communities, look beyond local boundaries, stop being busy and start creating. That's what Martin taught us about. And Martin taught us about innovation and creativity as well. And getting tech out to disadvantaged communities, and continuing to collaborate. So thank you for sharing on what you have learned. Is it possible to go to the next question just quickly if you had time before you logged off? And if you could give me an idea of any topics or theme that you do want to cover next year, and I thank you for staying on to do that. That would be really helpful to me. I'll put in, I would like to hear more about Indigenous communities. That's one thing that I know. If we get some connections with Indigenous communities next year, that would be something that would be of great interest to me. So
perhaps while we're doing that, I know we're a few minutes over time, but I just want to pass on a very sincere thank you to all our speakers and participants for such a thought-provoking event for the a very warm and sincere thank you to Dr. Leonie Wheeler and Jack Torres Gomez for their tireless work in bringing this event together, and a huge thanks to Sharon Whitcroft for her behind the scenes work today. All of you have done an incredible amount of work pulling this together and should be congratulated. As we've mentioned, we'll be sharing this presentation and the feedback notes with our attendees. And if you're interested in learning more about the Learning Community Strategy, or you can have a look at the Wyndham Council website. There's a link in the chat. You can also have a look at the ALCN website and consider joining. We're always welcoming new members to share their ideas about building resilient, entrepreneurial and sustainable communities. And Sharon's put a link to a short survey in the chat. We'll also send that out, so you can fill it out later, but we would really value your feedback to help us inform the work in the future. So thank you everyone for coming today. There's some ideas coming up already. Cross-generation learning, engaging young leaders, meet in Townsville. We'd love to meet in Townsville.
Oh, so would I. I remember the last visit to Townsville. It was really nice. It would be nice to meet in person in next year, perhaps, when we're all able. It would make a great change from our endless virtual meetings this year. So thank you everyone for coming. Feel free to keep adding some things to the chat, or yeah, completing your the Menti quiz. Yes, thank you. Those are all really interesting topics, Diane, aren't they? So we can have further conversations about those topics. And yes, I do think we need a longer time and more and perhaps less presentations and more conversation. So thank you.
Yes, I think inevitably I think we're very ambitious with our agenda, but also the technology wasn't kind to us today. But yeah, we're certainly taking these ideas and themes on board. And yeah, some suggestions to find each other on LinkedIn. So yeah, thank you all very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye from Swansea.